Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Small Talk with Shibby, my LCS post-game interview content. I'm joined by the victorious C9 Sven. And Sven, let's shift the game a little bit away and let's talk about everything you've done so far this weekend. You've been on the Mark Z show, you've been on the analyst desk, you've been on the caster, you've taken over. Have you always kind of had this, chaotic personality in you? I feel like deliberately this split, you're doing a really good job of just like showcasing who you are.
I mean, I'm not actually doing anything different than I was before. I've always, given my everything in everything I do, and this split Riot has been inviting me to come on a lot of like their shows, like with the Mark C content, the smart analyst desk thing, and casting, and I did some other stuff yesterday, or today rather with the interviewing, and did the LC9 desk, as I called it, the post game show. So I'm just grateful for Riot for giving me more opportunities to show my personality, because I do love the LCS. I love the League of Legends, excuse me, and I love showing that to people. So yeah, I always feel like I've always been this way. I just had less opportunities in the past to show it, right? And I'm not really much of a outgoing person. Like I wouldn't make content on my own, but if someone invites me to their thing, I'm happy to give it my everything, right?
Yeah, it feels like right now you're getting a really big platform to shine, like you said, and hopefully they keep giving you more opportunities. Let's now shift back into League of Legends and the LCS. You've now played 9 different supports, unique supports in the 12 games of LCS at the moment. You think it's a little bit on your part to like kind of break the stigma of maybe when you first started playing support, where you were kind of like lol Sven, the Enchanter player, like you played Braum, you've been playing Nautilus, you've been playing more engaged stuff, you've just been really flexing your champion pool so far. Is that a conscious effort on your part, or is that something you kind of work with the coaches on? Like, how does that kind of take into effect?
It's a conscious effort for me in solo queue and scrims to play the champs that I am not as known to be good on. But in LCS, it isn't conscious that I'm trying a new champ every game if I can. I'm just picking whatever I think is best, and that happens to be Braum this game, Rail that game. Then so be it, right? It's my job to prepare those champions if they are the best pick, because the worst feeling ever is when you go on stage and the best pick is something that you can't play or something that you aren't comfortable playing. Like as Golden Guardians this week, I think that maybe Thresh would have been better, or maybe I should have just ban Braum to pick something else. But I didn't want to play a melee champ into Braum because those aren't actually good against Braum. So I should play something like Pyke maybe, or Thresh if I was confident. But I'm not as practiced on those champs, so that feels really bad. So you pick Soraka and it doesn't fit your team comp as well. So that's the worst situation to be in. So that's why in solo queue you'll see me always playing the melee champions, in case I gotta whip out the Alistair soon or something, right? So yeah.
I was able to interview Fudge earlier this week, I believe on Monday, after your Golden Guardians loss. And I was talking to him about, how difficult it is for a team like you guys, who have obviously succeeded last split, went to MSI, learned a lot. How difficult is it kind of maintaining that form from split to split, still being a top team? Obviously, it feels like now you guys have some legitimate competitors with EG and Team Liquid, and even we can throw Golden Guardians in that conversation. Is it difficult for you to maintain that form? Because he talked about like how hard it is to focus, kind of being your own critic and like trying to be introspective in the game and saying, I can play the game the way I know and play it in a way that'll get me a win, but I have to be better so that I can prepare myself for potentially better competition. Do you feel the same way, or what are the difficulties that you face maintaining split to split dominance?
Yeah, I share some of that mindset that a big part of it is fighting complacency. I mentioned that in another interview earlier this week, that shadow boxing and making sure you don't get complacent is really important. I've been there before where, maybe me or my teammates got complacent in 2020 summer when we were, almost undefeated in spring split, and then COVID canceled MSI, so we didn't go there to get our wake up call. And then in the middle of summer, we got a wake up call that we weren't actually that good anymore. And then it was too late, right? Because we got too complacent perhaps before. So a big part of it is shadowboxing and always questioning yourself. And even in scrims, if you're stomping someone, you're like, is what I'm doing actually good, or did it work because my opponents misplayed? It's important to always keep yourself in check in that regard and never get complacent and lazy. I'm someone that I think I work smart, but I also work hard. So I never stopped playing solo queue. I never stopped watching VODs. I always watch, the good teams. Right now, I'm on JGG hype chain. I think that they're super insane. But I also like watching Genji, and I make sure to keep up with all their games and looking for things I can implement in my own game. The scrims right now aren't super good quality because with the new format of 3 days of scrims only, you have less games than before. Even with
Mhm.
night block that we have in most days, it's like with less games per week, you have to compensate by trying more things in less games, right? So a lot of the games are used on trying champions. Like, oh, this week Tristana has seen a lot of priority. So MS's first time Tristana. That sometimes leads to games that are more focused on champion practice instead of game practice. So yeah, we just gotta stay focused on all these things. And I think that for us, like I said, just being our own biggest critic is most important. Our teams in our regions stay ahead as well the whole time. JNG never stopped being ahead of everyone else. So I think that EG is a good competitor in the LCS, but in scrims they aren't as good practice as they are. I also think that that team lacks experience. So in playoffs they might be worse than they are now. I think that's almost a given that they will be worse than they are now. But they're definitely having a hot streak. And even though they lost to NRG, who seems to be the first place killers these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that we'll be solid in playoffs. I think no one on our team ever stops working hard or trying hard at least. So
Speaking to you, obviously you talked about Genji, you talked about EG, the international stage. How does a team like Cloud9 and yourself balance maybe the aspect of, hey, we need to win LCS and we need to obviously bring home a championship, but also we want to have international success, right? Like, how do you balance those two things? How do you prepare for competition that almost always year in and year out is fundamentally better than you guys, right? I mean, you guys as in the LCS. How do you prepare to make an international splash against LCK, against LPL, and even EU LCS, while also maintaining the fact that you guys also have to win LCS? How do you practice for each of those?
well, this year is different than most because there's going to be a long break. LCS is currently the fastest, or whatever you say, fastest
Yeah, it'll
region.
end the
We're
quickest, I believe.
schedule. Yeah, we'll end the quickest. Yeah. So and there's a long break between that and Worlds this year, as well as going to be later this year in Korea. So I think this year will be actually be one of the best years for the Western teams because you can go to Korea a lot earlier than everyone else, and you can scrim a lot earlier just for practice. I often say the biggest difference between Western and Eastern teams is that we don't practice against the best every single day. They do, and not to sound like I'm coping or anything. Obviously, the West is very far behind. We've seen already the gap has gotten even bigger since last time the West was competitive was in 2019 when G2 made finals, right? And they got 3-0 even then. So it's hard to say we will be successful, but this year with a long break between LCS finals and Worlds starting, we can be in Korea for a long time. I'm personally probably just taking like a week break or 2 week break where I'm just playing solo queue anyways, right? And then I'm just gonna go to Korea ahead of time and just be there, play solo queue, maybe scrim. I'm not sure what the LCK timeline looks like, but maybe we can get some good scrims there. We do have Berserker and MNS. We also have a great manager, David, who has contacts, speaks Korean and Chinese, so he's the goat for that, right? So we have very good scrims at Worlds and MSI, thanks to those contacts that we have. So I'm confident that with a lot of time to practice, like during MSI, we didn't show it against Genji or against BLG, but we were getting so much better in scrims so quickly. We were actually winning scrims against good teams by the end of the tournament. But you only think, what if we had one more month in this environment every single day? Personally, I love that, right? So we'll see. I think World CG will be a lot different because we have a longer boot camp to catch
Yeah.
up, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it also work inversely, right? Teams have a longer time to analyze you guys, and if you guys are dominant, they'll put the prep in. But I like that attitude. I actually probably agree with that because the level up we see is almost always during the Korean boot camps or the Chinese boot camps or so on and so forth. I think a lot of the teams that are at the top right now, Team Liquid, they were at the MSI boot camp, and obviously they're looking really good right now. I do want to talk about, since you mentioned solo queue, since you mentioned all that, I asked Fudge the same question, and I wanted to get your opinion if you share kind of the same beliefs that in a recent interview, I think Berserker did with Ashley Kang, he said that a lot of the Korean players, and I guess, imports in general, kind of complain about the solo queue level within the LCS, and he kind of just he threw them all out the water. He said essentially like, if you guys are playing 8 to 10 hours a day, then yeah, you guys could make these comments. But in reality, he believes that a lot of the guys are only playing like 4 hours a day. He's doing the same things he did in Korea, and he's obviously maintained his form. Do you hold that same opinion? Do you feel like, I feel like your team is a very niche case where all of you guys are grinders, right? You are a massive grinder, Berserker, massive grinder. I think Jimenez, was setting his sights on like rank 1 or top 10 in LCS when he came in, right? Like obviously all of you guys are massive grinders. So do you kind of share that same sentiment? Do you feel that, solo queue level is copium at this point?
People often say that Berserker speaks fluent Sven because he often has the same opinions as me and same language as me, and I agree with his take. It's true, and it's based to say, call out people like that, but I agree. Solo queue is worst. The ping is higher. Their queues are longer, and the games are lower quality. That's just a fact, right? But there isn't any alternative for you. Like, sure, it's bad, but what am I gonna do? Just not play and just get worse every day, and I don't play? Because even if the players are worse, you can still practice your own mechanics and your own champion pool and these type of things. So I don't think it's fair to just complain without at least trying your part and making it better. I've been high challenger every single year I've been here. I was rank 1 and 2 in like 2021 or something, I think it was. And I don't care as much about the rank these days. I just care about, at least making the games better that I play. So not that much to say about it, right? Like, it's fair enough that they complain, but you still have no better choice to improve, right? Champions queue is a concept that I would like if it worked, but it's just so hard to make it work because there's always like, oh, the queue time is too long, or there's like too many unskilled
MMR.
players. It sounds harsh, but like,
yeah,
the queue is
collegiate
long,
and
then you're inviting too
NACL.
many college players who aren't even like in challenger in the first place, right? They're like in lower levels of play, and then that ruins the game because if you have an LCS player who's trying for his life in Champions queue against a college player, the game is really hard to play. So it's a really hard balance between queue time and game quality in Champions queue because in Champions queue people queue up expecting a really high game quality, right? And then when one guy gets stomped, it's hard to make it work. But I want Champions queue to like be a thing that people play, and I loved it during the spring season in last year, I think it was. But it's just a hard thing.
Wouldn't it fundamentally already be a higher game quality, or are you saying pros, or I guess people are expecting a game quality with the amount of work in, right? Because in my mind, a collegiate player that plays on like a collegiate team and all that would still be better than like potentially a 10-man game of like, maybe some masters, maybe some GMs and some challengers that are all solo queue, right? Like the communication aspect. That's my opinion. Obviously, you've played it, right? But like, do you think the expectations of the champion queues games are much higher for the pros?
Depends how people treat it, because some people just want to go in solo queue and just test their champion, aka they want to, try something that might not work, and then in solo queue they end up griefing the game because they die and now they're behind, blah blah. And Champions queue, you will feel bad about doing that because you take it more seriously. But then you have like, let's say, Berserker playing against a lower tier Grandmaster ADC in Champions queue and taking the game really serious. It's gonna be a complete stomp, and then it's like people don't feel like that's extra rewarding either, right? So
because of the time
I
investment.
can see both arguments for it, but I think it's hard to make it work. Champions queue during Worlds 22 was really good, though. I will say I thought that was great. When all the players of Worlds were actually playing it, Chinese and Koreans were playing it. Some with comms, some without comms, and I thought it was great. So we'll see. I hope they can make it work in the future. Some sort of balance between game quality and queue times and such. They gave Worlds players priority at Worlds, over other people, randoms, whatever you want to call them. So we'll see.
Final question here. Do you think it's difficult for a lot of players that complain about the solo queue aspect for them to be like as introspective as you guys are, in terms of like, you have to be your own critique, and you have to kind of be play to a level that you don't necessarily always play to because of the opponent on the other side? Do you think that's like a big reason why C9 like doesn't, I guess, complain about solo queue as much?
I'm not sure I understand, but you mean like it's hard for lower tier players or teams to improve because they don't know what's the better and no one's showing them? Or
I would say this. The way Fudge explained it is that he viewed it as like, if he's leaning against somebody, like certain strategies would work only because he's laning against that person, but he needs to prepare himself for things
like
that, yeah, for like the best, right? Like, yeah, that trade worked out on wave 3 because I'm just better, but I can't always rely on that. Do you think a lot of players in the LCS that complain about solo queue in that aspect, like they're not trying to play to perfect their game, they're just kind of playing to win and they're not really improving, I guess?
Yeah, I think some people do that, but I mean, in this era of the internet, you can literally download the games of LPL and LCK, and you can watch the game in your own client. Like you can literally open the game on spectator mode and just click on the top laner, watch the lane phase, first 3 waves, close it, open a new one. Right? Like we have, it's called the Ruffle files. We have a
Ruffles.
database
Yeah.
with these buffer files. You open them in the client, and you can just watch the lane phase. If you really want to watch some matchup of Bin versus 369, you can watch that one. Fudge does that. He watches the best players in the world play matchups, and he's like, "Yep, this is how they played." Watches LCS, not how they played. So there are so many resources available to you that are really easy as well. They're free on the internet, right? Whether it's stats websites or it's VODs, you can always find these things. So I think there's no excuse for anyone to not seek out improvement. Whether you're just doing reps in solo queue, watching VODs or matchups, there's something you can always do to improve.
Sven, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're juggling a handful of jobs at the moment, right? Yeah. Do you have any final message to the C9 fans that may be watching?
Thank you as always for cheering for us. The support's been amazing for me. As always, the LCS is, in my opinion, thriving, and I'm glad that people are appreciating, my casting and my interviewing and my analyst desk hosting and my interviews and all these kind of things. So thank you for supporting me and giving me all these nice comments online.